I can't tell you the number of times in my life someone has walked up to me and who will only talk to the boy, my production boy. So now it's a joke, but I've actually called out to someone from my team and said, "उनको बोल दो decision madam लेती हैं, और madam ने बोला है तो ये होगा."
This week's guest on Questions I Wanted to Ask is the very talented and fabulous Devika Narayan. We all know her for the beautiful weddings she designs for her clients and how every girl dreams of having her wedding planned by Devika. I spoke to Devika about the traits that keep her going in such a tough industry, constant traveling, and still managing to keep herself grounded. She's spunky, sharp, passionate, and knows her job really very well. A little bit of all of this in my conversation with Devika Narayan today. Hi Devika, welcome to Questions I Wanted to Ask. I am so excited to ask everything about what goes behind the wedding planning business and in your head when you're doing all these big weddings and just like all these huge large scale weddings. Welcome on board. Looking forward to a very, very, good, insightful conversation.
Thank you so much, Anshu.
Okay, I thought, how do I warm up a conversation, on a podcast? Normally we start with lighter conversations, etc. There's one, I'm not going to get into all your big celebrity weddings because, I'm sure you have restrictions to talk about that. But there is an image from last year. Which was about some 700, 800-year-old temple where
1100.
you lit... 1100-year-old temple that you lit with diyas. And I think it was one of the most beautiful images I had seen. I can't even imagine the kind of energy that place would have had when you did the wedding. What was that wedding? And how many days did that take you to do such a large scale of wedding? And that, I think, in middle of the pandemic, right?
Correct. So I'll give you the official version of things and then I'll give you the non-official version of things because it's not meant to be a fun thing. That wedding was actually literally planned in the shadows of the pandemic. The first time I met them was in March and by then we had already shut office because you know how mad last year was. And this whole conversation seems relevant today because I'm in Bombay and we're back to square one, if not worse, -1. We literally till August, we had not seen the venues we were working off. The bride's mother would go and take videos and things. And the first time we went there was September. And the only reason we agreed to do the wedding was because she sent me a photograph of the temple and said, this is where I want my daughter to get married. And I looked at those images and I was like, yes. What I wasn't prepared for was 3 months of civil work, restructuring bits of it. I didn't know it was 1100 years old till I Googled it on the morning of the wedding because I was making a post about the temple and I was like, this is 1100 years old. But for me, it was a great experience because it was a part of, for me, every project is about history, right? I'm a lit major, by the way, for background. I trained to be a journalist. So the research part of it completely thrills me. So for me to go into research, that's the only temple in India where Ram and Sita are depicted without Hanuman. Hanuman is outside because they stayed there before she was abducted. And for us, that became the sort of inspiration and it was timed perfectly because this was a week after Diwali. So we wanted to do this whole Ram and Sita coming home and the bride and groom being like Ram and Sita. And it was such a big deviance from all my other work, which is more modern, contemporary Indian, that for me, this was very personal, as like a personal challenge saying I can do traditional Indian. And from a non-official front, I missed, I'm 33 now. I have been home for every single Diwali of my life with my parents, with my grandparents. And this was the year we couldn't be home for Diwali. It's one of the rules we've always kept as a team that we always take Diwali off because it's so special for all of us. And this year, because we had to quarantine ahead of the wedding, we couldn't. So for me, it was a personal project. I was like, that night should feel like Diwali for us. And we will make our own Dev Diwali. And that's what we did over there. So we had about 12,000 we had 12,000 diyas and we had 200 people to light them over 3.5 hours.
And the diyas kept going on and somebody would come and then put them again.
I will tell you the most amazing story that somebody told me later. So most of the temple things are I don't know if you know, but most wedding sites have men. we made sure that women came onto this wedding site because Shri, or the female energy, or Lakshmi, is a very important part of Hindu culture. And I wanted to make sure that the Lakshmi did something as well. So we had women to light the diyas and women to make rangolis as part of the decor of the temple. And at the end of the day, when I went to say thank you to them and to whatever paid them, they said, we cannot take money because you don't understand what a shuk thing you have done by allowing us to light diyas in a temple. And the priest walked out and said, I have lived here for 3 generations of my family have lived here, and we've never seen the temple lit up like this. So just let us please chill here for 10 minutes, because for us it's so special. This is our home. It's what we worship. We worship the space as much as the deity inside it, and it's been a part of our life. So for you to give us this opportunity to decorate it or see it like this, and those parts of my job are the humbling parts, Anshu, because you don't expect this to happen, right? I'm doing a wedding. Yeah. I'm making a set there. I have a theme in mind. We have the bride and groom in mind. You don't expect the people who are working on it to come up to you and say things like this. So that's what that wedding was. It was, I think, the most surreal experience of last year. It was such a bad year for all of us, emotionally, economically. And that was just it. I remember posting this saying, it's been such a dark year, and sometimes you have to find light yourself. And then hire people and get 12,000 bits of light to light it up yourself. And that's exactly what we were doing. We were just trying to find the light literally at the end of a very dark year.
I mean, honestly, whoever thought of the idea, but I mean, when I looked at the pictures, I was like, dude, what is the energy of this place, would be, it's 2 people getting married to each other, but their generations would remember something like this. And that's...
It's the cultural implications of what we were able to do, because suddenly a lot more people are going to the temple. It was a forgotten temple. The bride's parents have committed themselves to the temple and said, we'll redo portions of it which were broken down before, and we actually did civil work and restored portions of the temple. So it's also the cultural aspects which go so much more than just 2 people getting married.
Yeah. And, also it made me think that impact can be created in any business, right? You don't have to be in a social services business for impact to be created. Even in your very small circle of, people that you work with, or maybe a larger, or maybe much bigger, the kind of army of people that you work when you put together a wedding, right? Small things like bringing in female workers to kind of light diyas. It's so beautiful. But tell me, do you do this consciously when now, especially because there's this entire, suddenly this conversation of, bringing equality even in weddings, right? Suddenly somebody is bringing a female priest, and we are talking about patriarchy and all. Has this been like, is it actually there? But on ground hai kya? Matlab, I know certain celebrity weddings are talking about, bringing this patriarchy ko down karo, and, let go of certain traditions, let go of kanyadan, stuff like that, which is great. But actually what is happening? Are women talking about it? And are you able to, kind of work on these small things, which is kind of equalizing or normalizing the roles of both men and women in, weddings or a union?
So 2 things. Firstly, I don't think I'm doing this consciously. I've done this all my life, and I credit this simply to how I was brought up. I was brought up by this entourage. There's no better way to describe this, of very, very strong women, from my aunts to grandmothers to... it's a joke that while the men were great, it's the women who bullied them. Even till date, I think the men in our family get bullied by all the women because they're all extremely headstrong. I remember when I was getting married, my father-in-law commented and said, you'll do well in this family. We're used to having strong women around us, is what he told my parents. Saying, we know your daughter's a bit cuckoo, but we're used to cuckoo ladies in our house who know their mind, who speak their mind to do this. So I don't think, even if you ask me, I had a largely female-run company till a few years back. In fact, people till date write to me and ask me, do you just not hire men? Or why don't you hire men? And now it's a joke that I have a 8% or 20% quota for men, so I have 2 boys in my team. But I don't think it's consciously done. It's very subconscious for me. For me, also, weddings are a mode of communication. It's how I communicate my ideas to the world. It's how I want to bring change to the world. I mean, I could have been an architect, I could have been a florist, I could have been anything, and I would still be talking about the same things I do now, and finding meaning in what I do. The second bit is coming to the fact about whether these are active conversations, they are active conversations. Because look at the way the landscape of weddings has changed. I don't know when you got married, but till about 10 years back, even, the parents of the bride and grooms were making all the decisions, right?
Yeah.
The couple were barely involved. It was the
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
Today, with people getting married later, with people having more achievements, with more couples paying for their own
Financially
weddings,
independent.
correct. With more couples paying for their own weddings, they
Weddings.
get to call the dibs.
Yeah.
And relationships today are far more democratic than they were
Earlier. Yeah.
right? So that equation and that relationship has to come into weddings. And it comes from both sides. It comes from this whole idea of bridezillas, no? I have groomzillas, dude. I have grooms who are far more invested in the wedding than the brides are, because so many of my brides are at work. They're just like, we don't have time to plan this wedding, so he's doing this. And I have work, so I'll figure out when I can come. And obviously that dynamic comes through to weddings. It's a dynamic we all live today. We're in lockdown here. At no point do people bat their eyelids when I tell them I don't cook, my husband cooks in my house. My staff looks at me and they find it so bewildering that, when I walk in, they say, "Aaj khana kya banega?" I was like, "Buddy, I have no clue kya banega." That dynamics are coming into weddings, obviously, because there's no his and her anymore. It's us getting married. And when us getting married, then it's completely normal for a bride to say, "I'm going to walk in with you on my barat," and our parents should receive us. Or why should there be any giving? My parents got married 35 years ago, and then my nanny refused to give away my mother. She's like, "My daughter's not a guy. She's not cattle. Why should I be dan karwing my daughter? I'm not dan karwing my daughter." At my wedding, I had no kanyadan, no bidai, nothing, because my mother's like, she doesn't live with us. Who are we doing bidai for, and what are we doing dan for? So I think because our ecosystems, our worlds are changing, I understand it's a very privileged change as well. And I cannot speak to the rest of the country. There's a certain kind of people
this
who are
thing,
changing.
huge gap.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not just celebrity, it's just, it's urban, it's a very urban change that's happening, but it is a change that's happening and percolating down to every aspect of life, from home to weddings to just finances even. So many couples don't have joint accounts anymore.
Yeah.
Right? My parents had a joint account, they spent from it. My mother asked me saying, "Tumhara joint account nahi hai?" I was like, "Nahi, he makes his own money, I make mine, and we find a middle point to spend it," right? And that's just how relationships are today. And I think it's natural for it to come to weddings. And that's exactly what's happening.
Interesting. Somewhere in the conversation you mentioned about how, all these things have started becoming a communication point, right? But what happens when you go, because weddings, especially large scale weddings, families are involved. In India, you can't take away from the fact that, and the moment families are involved, traditions come in. Isko acha lagega, isko bura lagega. The normal patriarchal setup comes in. How difficult it becomes for you as a woman, as a wedding planner, to go and then speak to men who are used to of a certain authority. This thing, because you're also, and I'm particularly talking about certain sections where uncles will take a call. Say, ye hotel mein rukega, ye itna room milega, stuff like that. How difficult it is, or what is the thing in terms of, how do you
to tell you?
Sure.
I remember when I started out, I was 25 years old. I closed my first project, and this lovely gentleman, and the bride's father is my friend today, by the way. He calls me and says, "Do you want to come over for a drink together?" Kind of relationship is what we have. I remember he paid my advance, and I was leaving, and he looks at me and says, "Ye galat hai." I'm like, "Kya galat hai?" He's like, "Ye galat hai." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You're too young to do this." And I was like, "I have to white hair to prove it. I mean, I'm not that young. I can do this." And every now and then you're sitting in front of a gentleman who's looking at you saying, "You're too young." Thankfully, I've become old now, so they stop saying you're too young or you're too this or that. But I think if you're professional and if you know what you're talking about, people take you seriously. And it takes people I think as women, we've learned to be assertive. We've learned to identify who these people are, not just men, women also all the time. Saying, "Will you be able to do this?" And there's that subversive, condescending tone that comes in that I know you recognize and all of us recognize. And it's just that we've learned to sort of hold our own ground, and that's what I've learned. Forget, these are educated people. Try working on a site with men. They are not used to taking instructions from a woman. I can't tell you the number of times in my life someone has walked up to me and who will only talk to the boy, my production boy. So now it's a joke, but I've actually called out to someone from my team and said, "उनको बोल दो decision madam लेती हैं, और madam ने बोला है तो ये होगा." So now the boys walk around and said, if she said it, it happens. And I think it has a lot to do with holding your ground and knowing your things. If you have the knowledge, then the other person has no opportunity to question you.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned has worked in my favor, because I know what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, you have to reason with me because I know what I'm talking about. Till as recently as last year, we were sampling a tent structure, and this my tent person comes to me, and I asked him, I was like, height kya hai? He says 20 foot hai. It's 20 feet. I looked at him and I was like, this is not 20 feet, buddy. And he's like, this is 20 foot. I was like, get a tape, measure it for me if it's 20 feet. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I asked him, I said, what happened? He's like, no, they actually put it incorrectly. It's 16 feet. The bride and groom literally burst out laughing, and they said, do not take her lightly. She knows what she's talking about. If she's looked at it and told you it's the wrong height. And I think that's the difference. If you can stand your own ground, and if you know what is right or wrong, you're able to get over it. Today, when I walk up to site, people don't ask me. It's a done thing, right? In weddings, that women take care of flowers and fabrics, and women don't understand structure and lighting, right? It's a man's job. I think the people I've worked with have learned over time that she knows what she's talking about. She knows about these aspects also, so you can't cross-question her. And that's been a survival kit, but that doesn't mean I don't get asked even today. I don't get put down even today. I'm constantly not called hyper or other words that they use for us because I am being assertive. And it's become a personal battle where I'm not afraid to call this out anymore. So I make sure I call it out, saying I'm being professional. I'm not being hyper. If I've told you to sign something, you have to sign it. We do it as processes A, B, and C. So, and I've learned to say no's when people don't want to listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, there are times when you're talking to a man, or the man wants to talk to you, but he won't look at you. He'll look at somebody else and talk. I mean, that is like one of the most common thing. What do you do and especially when, for example, if it's your client whom you
I call them out on it and say that I'm the one.
You tell them कि मेरी तरफ देख के बात करो.
No, who else do you look at? Because I have a team of girls who are younger than me. So you have to look at me and talk. Or you have to look at one of us and talk. And I've been very forthcoming about it. So I tell the girls, I was like, he is going to call you out on it. So make sure you know what you're talking about. And whenever we've dealt with men, I've pushed the women up front, saying this is the only person you can talk to. So if you want your job done, you have to talk to X. My CEO is a woman who handles all my finances, who negotiates with fathers all the time and uncles all the time.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to talk to her, then we don't work on your project. So you choose. Do you want us or do you not want us? And they have a bride and groom at home or a young couple at home saying we only have to work with her. So there's no option there. You don't even need to call them out. It's just that you reach a point in your life where they have to work with you. So they talk to you straight up.
And then they go home and complain कि आजकल की नई लड़कियां आके, this is something that you hear most common?
Decreasingly, thankfully.
Decreasingly. Okay.
Yeah. And thankfully, I mean, I won't deny that there is a world that's changing. I won't deny my position of privilege where I meet people like this, like fewer people like this every year.
Yeah. But tell me, Devika, you have such a fantastic body of work, and after all these years you are able to stand that ground and say okay, but what happens to, and this can apply to any professions, not just wedding planning or events and all of that, a lot of us women who are entrepreneurs, who are in the sales business, or who has jobs which makes you talk to other men more frequently, but men don't respond, they don't answer, they will choose not to answer. How do you tackle situations like these? What do you have? I mean, what do you tell your younger people? Of course, I'm sure you there as a backing, right? But what would you advise the younger women to, how to tackle situations like this?
I have to say this, that because I had the privilege of working with a female boss, I learned how to teach my team how to do this, because at the back, you have a boss who's looking out for you, and I've learned to look out for it. But there's no denying to calling men out on this. There's no shame in it. If someone's not speaking to you, if someone's not responding to you, call them out and say, I've asked you this 4 times, why can't you respond to this? And there is no man to speak to. So it becomes you have to be forthcoming about these things, because it's just not permissible anymore. You can't, this whole boys is boys, we were brought up like this debate doesn't hold true today. Like for me, it's alien to have this conversation. with somebody, because I don't live in ecosystems like that. So when I interact with ecosystems like that, for me, it's a very harsh shock. So I remember there was a point, and internalizing this also, because I remember there was a point where I called out to my CEO and I said, "Aaj dress nahi, suit pen ke aana, because unse milne jana hai. And if he is going to take you seriously, make sure you're wearing a pantsuit so he takes you seriously." And she looked at me and I was like, "I understand what I'm saying is wrong. I understand it, but you have to get work done. So find the middle ground where you can hold your ground also, but you're willing to let go also."
Yeah. This is very interesting because so many similar conversations or similar questions I've asked other women. Somebody is a lawyer, somebody is an actor, somebody is a creator, and pretty much I've had similar answers in terms of their
And for me, I
experiences.
work with two polarizations, right? I deal with clients who are educated, who've seen the world. And then I deal with people on site, carpenters, genuine manual laborers. And I'm amazed that I see the same kind of behavior both ways. There's immense empathy on both sides. There's immense respect on both sides. There's also immense condescending on both sides. And it's not something that you can say just because you're educated or you're not educated, your worldview is going to change. I have met the most amazing florists and manual people who will take a step back and say, if you want it, aapko kya chahiye? What can we do for you? What is your vision? And for someone who's lived in a home where the women in his house are still in parda, for him to be forthcoming about this and recognize what you're doing, I think is far more fulfilling for me as well. So it's not something that, like you're saying, I mean, when you're talking to me about lawyers, I can't even imagine what they face every day. And you'll be shocked that even in my industry, there are more men than women.
Yeah.
Because all female-led companies have a man who's second in command.
Yeah.
My second in command is also female. So people are like, where do we go?
ये कैसे काम होता होगा इस कंपनी में?
Like, कैसे रन करती है आपकी कंपनी, and how is it? And normalizing it, normalizing saying my CEO has just produced a child. Her video is not on because she has a child crawling on her.
Yeah.
It is normal for me to say in a meeting today, saying deal with it. Or she cannot speak to you at this time because she's looking after her kid. And we have to normalize this.
But yeah, I mean, I agree, and the only way you can do is take one step at a time.
Correct. And be accepting of it, right? And as a leader yourself, and then as to the world also, you just have to deal. You can't say that today I'm going to change my world. You change the world one brick at a time, one step at a time, and you start moving those steps to see how you can do those changes. Like so many of the things you're talking about today, I don't face today at all, and I'm very fortunate for it, touch wood. But I did once upon a time, and I understand other people do, and I have a different set of challenges today.
Yeah.
Right. And all of us do.
All of us do. Yeah. I think, I'm speaking more from a perspective that there's so many young women or men who look up to you as a professional, even as an individual, on how do you kind of carry this entire thing and then constantly keep evolving as a company, keep pivoting, etc. Right. Having said that, you just spoke about that you work with two extreme ends of people. So one is the sophisticated clients who has the money to, do those kind of weddings, right? At the same time, then you work with the entire this thing, which the labor force and middle people, this thing. But it is a very operationally heavy industry, right? Where a lot of your work goes into execution, which means you are traveling, which means you're constantly on phone, which means you are maybe not even home for days and days and days, or you come late nights. What happens in personal life in the sense, give me a worldview of how do you then manage to continue do or have a personal life rather?
I'll give you figures, one better. Because you don't expect math from a designer, no? So I'll give you that.
No, I do expect, don't worry.
In 2019, my husband and I, who also travels as much as me, we both took over 100 flights through the year, spent only 32 days together in one city. Only 32 days together at home in the entire year. The lockdown was the first time we lived together at home for so long.
I'm sure.
It was a rude shock saying we're home. Now what? So I think I've been very lucky because my parents have never seen this life. So they have no clue. I mean, they live back home. They don't live with me anymore. I haven't lived with my parents for 10 years. So they understand I live a mad life. They don't get to know the day-to-day things, right? When they come to visit me, they're just like, I don't know how you function. When you achieve a little bit of success, then you're able to justify it. But for the first 5 years, they was like, what is wrong with you? My dad, legit, when I started working, my grandfather called up my mother and said, I used to live with my grandfather in Delhi, saying, do you need money? Who makes their daughter work like this? Because I came home at 2 a.m. and left back at 6 a.m. My dad thought I was a bar dancer.
Yeah.
Because he's like, who works these kind of hours? Who goes for a meeting at 10 p.m. at night? How is that even reasonable to do? On the other side, I'm so fortunate because I married a human being who understands this. He's from the same industry, so he understands me and my work and the mood swings and the time bit that comes with it, as do my in-laws. They understand that when I'm at work, so do my friends. They have a joke going that Devika's become seasoned during wedding season. Devika's seasonal. So around March, you'll see her come back to groups and lives and wants to socialize. And by August, September, she'll be fizzling out saying season hai. Do not call her during season. Nobody knows. Or call her and have a conversation and hang up. So I think everyone's just learned to live around it, and it's how we've lived for so long. So it's just become standard way of life.
But tell me, did you take that mental pressure, because we're so used to, like you said, your parents have not lived this kind of married life, if we had to say so, right?
Correct.
Did ever those thoughts come, saying that, oh my God, my husband and I are constantly traveling. How are we going to make this marriage? Maybe not work is not the right word, but I mean, marriage is about two people living together, right? Did those thoughts ever come?
That I think marriage is about two people being connected.
Yeah.
And I give the entire onus to Joe for this. He makes sure we're always connected, whether it's by phone calls, by WhatsApp, by whatever else. A large chunk of our relationship was between two cities. The first day of our marriage was across two cities. I used to live in Delhi and he used to live in Bombay. In fact, when I moved to Bombay, my mother-in-law was horrified. And she's like, I thought it'll take 5 years to move. I imagine you to be married in two separate cities. It just took a toll on me personally because I had pants that I wanted in Delhi and Bombay and the other way around. So I took a decision to move. But I think it has everything to do with being connected and being on the same page about a lot of your life and about your expectations of life. And I think if you have that sorted, everything else falls into place. For us, we've known what our life is like right now. For example, when we got married, we knew we'd never be together on an anniversary because it was peak wedding season. And I think if you know that right at the beginning, there is no sort of emotional guilt of not being together on an anniversary. Even when people call me, I find it so alien saying, I'm at work. Why are you calling me to wish me on my anniversary? That day means nothing to me. Or like, not just nothing to me, it's just not valuable to me.
You're not
we have other celebrations, right, which are more important to us. So I think it's just about finding what works for you. And there's no cookie cutter way, right? All of us travel so much today. All of us suddenly spend so much time at home. I've seen marriages falling apart because two people are not used to living together so much. And I think it's just, as long as you find what works for you, it works.
Yeah. Very interesting, because I mean, probably I think you're the first person I'm talking where the couple, both the partners, I mean, travel so much, right? Normally it's like generally one person traveling more, all of that, or they're both in the same cities, but then it has its own other set of challenges. But tell me, this also brings me to the fact that you and your husband kind of work together on certain projects, right? What does the dynamic work there? Because I'm assuming he's the one who's been called out by you to work on a project, because a planner would bring in the photographer.
Not
something
really.
like that, no?
I think we both hired separately and we both work together very rarely. It's also odd because when my work finishes, his work starts, because I'm a designer, right? So when I'm done setup, I move out. He comes to shoot. When he comes back to the room, I go for dismantling or to set up the next day, right? So we're rarely overlapping on site. But I have to tell you, we do have and both of us are hired separately. In fact, it's a joke because so many clients are like, we've saved a room because we know both of you will live together. So that kind of joke. But I think it all comes down to respecting what the other person does. And if you have equal respect, I think you have a good working relationship, which is what we share. And for us, it's not just about our professional work, it's even the projects we start at home. And I think if you respect the other person and what they bring to the table and the way they think, and you're democratic over there, I think it resonates to the kind of work you do, the way you live your life, the way your relationship works.
Hmm. 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 Interesting. But tell me, so now in a non-COVID world, I'm assuming you were traveling almost 70 or 80% of the time. What's
Correct.
happening now with the
We're
COVID
both at
scenario? Of
home
course.
in two different rooms, talking to two different people on two different mics and cameras. We go to office every day in two separate rooms. We have a little pup now, so the door is open so that the pup can go up and down and disturb both of us as per his whims. We meet for lunch. We meet for dinner. We spend.
It's sounding a lot like me and my husband
Correct. We
because
have a
yeah.
great cold coffee time in the evening, which is what I'm going to eventually hang up this call on, because that's my cold coffee time, which is sacrosanct. We're together in the morning, and that's just work ends at a certain time, and then we're together like we would on a normal day. My mother was horrified. She's like, "Why didn't you go and ask him?" I was like, "He's working in his office. I can't just walk in." And my mother doesn't understand that two people can be in the same house and still not communicate every minute.
Yeah.
It's just, they're like, "What do you mean by we're in separate rooms?" It's like, we have separate offices, and that's where we go and work. So that's how being at home is like.
So the reason I asked you this is because a lot of me, along with my friends, and it's a joke, right? That we all say that, okay, we are okay to work from home. A lot of us who have offices and who don't have like this thing, but we want the husbands to be out because we're so not used to, and the kids, of course, to go to school because we're so not used to, all of us.
To school, I want my husband at home because he cooks. I can do everything else. I can't cook, and he cooks. So I spent a week at home alone last week, and we have no help coming in because of the lockdown. And I practically died because I was like, who is going to cook for me? I don't like the food I make myself. So poor guy had to make dabbas and leave for me and say, okay, there's food for you in the fridge, or I'll order food for you.
This is quite amazing, and this is, I think, one of
the other end of the spectrum.
It's the other end of the spectrum, yeah. I mean, it's still not 80% of the working a working couple. Most of them, it's still the women who are doing it. But I think the idea is to bring your kind of stories out more, right?
So that I think it just boils down to what works for you, and you can't be obligated to do something just because it exists.
Yeah.
Right? And we've all got this weird sense of patriarchy ingrained into us.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate simply by virtue of the men around me who do far more than what I understand is what the requirement is. I mean, till date, whether it's my grandfather, whether it's my father-in-law, whether it's my father, they all make subah ki chai at home. And all the women wake up late because the men get up in the morning and make chai and coffee. It's a done thing in my house.
And that kind of sowed the seed of normalcy.
I'll never forget my grandmother calling out to my father. He was complaining, newly married parents of mine, that she had to do this. And my grandmother looks at him and says, "Tumko karna nahi aata. You can't do this yourself." And he's like, "I can't." She's like, "Go then do it yourself. Why are you looking for her to do this?" And my brother on the other end, who's forever amused, he's like, every time my mother tries to tell me something and I react to it, he's just like, every day I hear my sister being told something which is patriarchal and her turning around and saying, "I'm not doing this." Like, why can't you send, if he wants this, why can't you do this for him, for example? And I'm like, I won't do it. And my brother keeps cracking up because he's like, every day she's fed a new thing, and both of them turn around and say, we won't do this.
Yeah.
So I think it's the smaller things every day, right? That's what makes a bigger impact.
I agree.
It's like nobody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to change the world. You have to start with your daily actions of like seeing who enjoys doing what and who doesn't enjoy doing what, and finding that sort of like empty, like one line where both walk a few steps. I think no relationships are built in isolation. Both have to walk certain steps together.
I agree. I think it's interesting because pretty much the same thing applies to when you go to workplaces, right? And you find different sorts of men and women, and you need to kind of...
It's for us because all men and all women have to do the same job.
Yeah.
So the women can't get away by saying that something's heavy, we can't lift it. And the men can't tell me that they can't fill cushions or they can't understand flowers. And that's a rule. I understand if something's physically heavy and you can't lift, but don't tell me it's a boy's job to do something or it's a girl's job to do something else, and I won't do this.
Yeah, but when you started, was it very, very heavily,
Of course, it still is in so many companies.
Yeah.
In so many places, it still is that this is the boy's job. A girl can't stay on the site till late at night, or a girl won't go alone. Right? And it's about creating safe spaces yourself, of course, looking out for the people who work with you, and also making sure that as a leader, you don't let those excuses flourish.
Sure.
Right? So I think it's all three of those that have changed things.
But tell me something, because you run your own setup, and I'm sure there are other companies who are in the same space, or your competition rather, who are led by men, right? Do you ever feel that there are certain things as a leader you cannot do because, because of the gender, or sometimes you can't approach certain people because you don't get the kind of response that you would get, but the other competitor would get because he's a man, or there's a certain boys club out there. Do you feel that? Is it there?
I'm ruthless.
Okay, can you explain what is ruthless for you? How do you explain ruthlessness in business for you?
Is if I want something and if I'm qualified to get it, I make sure I will. There's no stepping back. If there's a men's club, good for you. On the table, you have to speak to me as an equal. We're presenting as an equal. If you don't select me for my work, it's fine. That's fair. But that should be the only reason why people are not hiring me.
But
you don't think that as a business, we've made sure we made a business that's not dependent on other people. Or that's the goal.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I don't care for the boys' clubs. If the best projects in the country are coming to me, if the best is coming to me, then have fun in your little club, guys. Right? So I think that's what I said about standing up for yourself and making sure that you are independent. And you can be friends with everybody, but you can't say just because someone's a woman, they can't get some kind of work.
Okay.
Or you won't recommend them. And if you're the best at what you do, if you're good, you will get recommended. People will eventually want to work with you, right?
But it's a question I've asked a lot of other female entrepreneurs as well, about networking, right? Do you often find that men, it's easier for them to network, they have whatever clubs, etc., and that leads you to kind of on loss of opportunities or sometimes projects, etc.
Both ends for me.
Yes,
that's very fair. I'll tell you the flip end. Guess that happens to me all the time, by the way. I'm sure. I mean, I don't have to say more words about it.
Yeah.
It's a flip end because somewhere in some city, a young girl wakes up saying, I want an all-female gang to lead my wedding.
Yeah.
And then you don't hire a man. And the fact is, there are more of us. Simple. My brides are so accomplished that they don't want to take nonsense.
Yeah.
And so many times I've been on a site where I'm designing and the planner is a gentleman and the bride has said, listen to her. I don't care what you think, listen to her.
Yeah.
And the fact that both sides exist is so, what's the word? I want to say
ironic.
No, strengthening.
Empowering.
Damn, that's a word right in this conversation. It's so empowering to have the other side.
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that the other side is increasing. By the day, I'm meeting more and more women. It was amazing. I did a wedding in March where the bride called out to me and said, I want a photo with all the girls. And I'm like, what? She's like, look around. All the companies are women led here. And I was like, did you think of this? She's like, no, but I woke up one day and realized this. We have to do a photo together.
Amazing.
And it's incredible.
That's empowering. Yeah.
Exactly. And the fact that you don't do this consciously is what is empowering. And the fact that there are, especially in my business where the bride is the center of everything.
Yeah.
If those decisions are changing and because we are empowering, and that's changing because we're empowering the women around us. Now we are the brides. It's not like these magical women are coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's the other side of it, which is what I enjoy looking at more. And if the other side is coming to me, you guys can have fun in your little smoking boys clubs or whatever it is you have. I mean, I get to choose to work with those people.
Sure. I mean, the reason I'm asking this because, every time I ask a new entrepreneur from a different, different walk of life and different area, genre of work, I get new answers. But I think the gist is all that you keep going. But tell me, what are these new age brides if they are the ones who are taking the shots, right? I'm sure there's a huge difference even in the last 10 years that you've seen, right? What are these new age brides and what are they standing up for?
Themselves.
Sure.
And their relationship as well. The fact is, they're all well educated, they're all well traveled, they all work, they all earn their own money, they found their own place. Then even, and it's not an age thing, even the 20-year-old today is far more involved, is as evolved as a 40-year-old bride today. Right? And they've been brought up and they've made a space for themselves where they can tell their parents to take a step back and say, we want a certain thing done a certain way. And their relationships are more equal, where the bride and groom together make decisions about their wedding or their home or their life. It's not a one part decision. And I think that sentiment is coming to weddings, where you want to choose people who are professional, who are smart, who understand, and are not there just because they know somebody. Those days of my dad knows a tent wala are gone. Right? You want people who are good at what they do, whose work stands for themselves.
So tell me, Devika, I mean, we've spoken so much about your business, but I want to now talk about who you are and what you're doing to, keep yourself like running every day. Whatever it has taken you to come to this point in the last 10, 12 years that you've been in the industry, right? I'm sure there are now completely different sets of qualities or whatever, individual pursuits that you would need to be able to reach the next 10 years, right? What is it that you're focusing now after having achieved a certain amount of success? Now, what do you want to acquire more as an individual?
So much. I can't have this will become a book.
Sure.
I say this so often that I'm exactly where I was when I was 13. I'm exactly where I wanted to be when I was 13. And I'm nowhere close to where I want to be.
Sure.
And the fact that my goals evolve every year.
Sure.
And how, we were talking earlier about how the birth of your kid changed your life, right?
Yes.
Bringing a dog home changed my life. Birth of a kid, so I think
it's a responsibility, even if it's
correct, completely. It's just something that's time. I mean, I suddenly have so much more respect for the simple things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Also, our goals change every year. I want to design cities. I want to write books. I want to make products. I want to have more time for myself. I want to read more. I want to be inspired more. There's no limit to what there is that I can possibly do. And for me, I have a very simple belief that every few years, life gives you a chance to completely reinvent yourself. And if you're able to do that consistently and change your roles, I think you're meant for greatness.
How do you ensure that reinvention process is in the right way?
There is no right or wrong way. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think it is. If I'm to look at my last 10 years, I worked for somebody else for 5 years, and I made sure I was a very good employee. Then I started leading a team, and that's what I did for the last 5 years. I was out to make a brand, make a company. Today, I'm out to make an incredible team. For me, it's as important that my team gets known for the work we do as I am. And that's what I'm dedicating my next 5 years to, is just making sure that I'm able to create more people like myself. Sure. Right? Because that's and I want to be a mentor, and I want the people who work with me to be better than me. And that's what my next 5 years are dedicated to. And these are just small roles. And while I do that, I want to take a step back. I want to do things that bring me joy. I want to read again. And it seems like such a luxury. Whereas I'm sure some people are listening to this and it sounds completely alien, but for 5 years, I'm a literature major. I used to read 100 books a year. For 5 years, I have not been able to survive a novel. And the fact that I have the time to devour books today. This morning, my husband was complaining, saying, who keeps a book in the bathroom? I keep a book in the bathroom because I want to keep a book in the bathroom to read when I'm in there. I think it's about life. It's about finding new passions. And I think the more passions you find, the more your outlook changes. For me, you learn. It's both fortunate and unfortunate that my hobby is my job. Right? But it's meant that I have had to find new hobbies. I've suddenly become obsessed with gardening, for example, and growing my own food. And it's amazing how that's changed my worldview and how that simple thing has changed the way we work.
Sure.
Kind of ethics we're changing. So that's what I mean by reinventing, is finding new passions and letting those passions change you. There's no right and wrong in life. You have, we're all in our 30s, 20s, 40s. We have long lives, hopefully, right? We are think of your life as 20 years, as 30 years, and then think, what are you going to do in that life?
Yeah.
It's a long time to keep doing the same thing, right? So find new passions, let new adventures thrill you, pre-failure. These are not like captions. These are things you should actively be doing in your everyday.
Okay. So in all of this, how do you maintain your mental sanity? Because it's a very, very operationally heavy industry that you work in, right? And a lot of stress, I'm assuming. How do you maintain that mental sanity? Is my first question, and I'm going to move to the second part also.
I think it's very important to be able to know when you need downtime and know when you need to pause and take a step back. And for me, I've been very cognizant of this ever since I began working. That I have days where all I do is vegetate. I lie on the couch. I have the most horrible food on the planet. By horrible, I mean insanely yummy but bad for my body. I watch TV, and that's all I do for days. Is just that is the physical, mental cleaning out. I find ways then after that to inspire me again, whether it's traveling, whether it's reading a book, whatever it is that it takes you to inspire you again. And I think it's important to call out those days. It's become it's become fashionable to say we're busy, no? We're too busy to do something. I told myself 3 years ago that I will never say I'm busy. I'm never busy. And it's important for me to make time for things that matter to me. So I know that at a certain time of the day, I'll do something that brings me joy. It brings me joy to water my plants. At 5:30, I'll go out and water my plants. And I will make sure my days function around my 5:30 watering of my plants and my cold coffee. I'll take my days off saying I'm not available today. It could be for half a day, it could be for a full day, it could be 3 days, whatever your life can afford you. And say, today I'm taking my downtime off. Of course, now I have a dog who sits on my face even on the downtown time. And I'm sure some of you will have kids to do that. But the fact is, you have to be able to call out and say, my body needs rest, my mind needs rest. That's the only way to function. Otherwise, we'll all burn out.
Yeah.
And I think that's been my lucky factor that I'm able to call out that time and say, I'm sorry, today I can't.
It's often I often experience that as women who are probably doing well, who are at the senior most leadership level, etc., have a hard time taking that off, right?
Correct. It is because we put that pressure on ourselves.
Because we're constantly
correct.
Yeah.
It's that message. That's the first thing I told you today. I was so happy when you said today I can't be there because I have other things to do. We should have other things to do. We should do things that give us joy. I don't know why we pain ourselves over it.
Honestly, it's been a learning to actually learn to say no.
Correct.
Because just simply saying when the other person's saying, okay, do you want to book this time? In a normal scenario, 5 years back, I would have said, oh shit, how will this person feel if I say no at this time, etc. But, there are some things that you have to say. And
correct. And that's what I'm saying. You have to pick your priorities and say, this matters to me.
Yeah.
And whatever it may be, you have a kid, dude. It's, how odd it is to tell in the middle of a meeting, saying, guys, I'm sorry, it's my dog's lunchtime. People look at me saying, are you out of your mind? Are you like hanging up on me because you have to feed your dog? And I'm like, yes, it's normal to me. This is my life. Deal with it.
Yeah, this is personal life as good as that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm working from home means I have more of that personal life. The fact that I don't have help is more of that personal life.
Yeah. But the other part to my question was, in all of this, how much importance or how much are you disciplined about your own physical and mental or spiritual health? If I have to put it that way, whatever I put all
a lot.
Yeah.
I make sure I have downtime because my work is creative. I can't think. Whatever it means to empty your brain, to inspire your brain, to just make sure the room is clean so I can think. So mental a lot because that clearly affects my work. I'm the most terrible person to speak about anything to do with physical health because I wake up early and all I do is sit on my phone in the morning. I'm terrible. I have a dog, so I walk now. But as I'm nicely becoming comfortable on the other side of 30, I'm realizing that I have to pay more attention to that. And even spiritually as well, I think I enjoy my moments of silence in the morning. I wake up early. I make sure I'm sitting outside. When I'm having my little cup of coffee, when I'm looking after my plants, for me, it's very spiritual. It's me connecting with myself, my day, building routine and habit that makes me calmer. And I think a lot of this has happened in the last 2 years. And I think 2020 has been a huge defining factor to say, pause, wind down, do this. It's important. And I think when it becomes a part of your life, you go for it more. I want to be speaking to you 1 year later and saying, listen, I'm fitter, I'm eating better. I hope I do that as well.
I do hope you do that, because then you'll also set example for a lot of women who look up to you.
Guys, please don't be me. Please go.
We're all striving. Don't
Please
worry.
have 3 bottles of water a day. I have mine here. I'm starting small.
Start small, but please make sure you do. I think I'm also doing that, so I'm also not very good, but yeah.
No, I mean it's important, and I think it's important to learn the best from other people.
Agreed.
And I mean, we're all imperfections, right?
Yeah, all of us are, but learning needs
Correct.
to continue.
As long as you acknowledge it and know it, do it.
Absolutely. That, I think, almost brings me towards the end of the conversation. I think I've kind of covered pretty much what I wanted to. Slightly personal, but now considering you've been married for like 4 years, right? What is there? Are there murmurs of having a baby and a child? And are you and your...
you?
No, I don't have a number.
Yeah, I this seems like I get asked this every day.
Yeah.
Sorry, your question was?
My question was, yeah, do people ask, and what is your response, and what is your take on this? I know it's completely between those two people who wants to have that child or not. Correct. Or but how do you deal with that pressure? What do you think about it? How do you deal, or whatever? I mean, what are your thoughts right now on this, considering you also face that pressure?
I think it's normal to face that pressure, and I don't think it's going to go. It's like being in 12th and being told, "Achhe number lao, achhe college mein jao." Like when I wound up in college, after I wound up in acha college, I looked at my mother and said, "Ab kya karoon?" She's like, "Mujhe kya pata?" So I whiled away 3 years in college because I didn't know what to do. My mother started telling me to get married when I was 20 years old. I got married at 28. So for 8 years, I was completely normal to my mother saying, will you get married now? Are you going to get married? Do you not want to get married? You know how that conversation goes.
Yeah.
So I think being asked is one thing, but I think it boils down to what you can or cannot do.
Yeah.
I'm all for having kids. I'm all for it working for people it works for, as long as you're willing to take the responsibility.
Yeah.
And if it works for you, it works for you. I think it's important. I think when you bring life into the world, or when you bring a new life home, whether it's in the form of a kid, a fish, a dog, whatever works for you, your job should be to give them the best life they can have. And if you think you can give them the best life they can have, then please go ahead and do this. If my mom's listening, we are not having kids right now.
I am glad our episode...
I'm still cleaning my dog's poop. I cannot upgrade yet.
I hope whenever you are ready, or if you don't want to be ready, completely your call.
I think it's completely fine for people to do whatever works for them.
Whatever works for them.
On all women want kids is hogwash. I don't find other people's kids sweet. I may find my own kid cute.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not the kind of person who walks in and just like picks up and plays with random kids. I do that with dogs, for example.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's fine to be whoever you are and whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
and nobody else should ever pressurize you into doing something which was not going to work for you.
Also, how ready you and your partner are, because both of you need to be taking that responsibility.
And we've all, as a generation, we've all had parents who became parents really young.
Yeah.
And that defined the way we were brought up. I think today we have kids at a later age, I think will be far more different in our bringing, because, I mean, at 21, how can you be, I mean, you have barely seen the world yourself. To bring up a kid that young, you're still growing up yourself.
Yeah.
And my mom had me at 21, 22. So suddenly when I turned 21, 22, I realized how tough it was for her to suddenly deal with so many new things. And I think it's unfair to put anybody through that, women and men, because today both take the ownership at home.
Yeah, I agree. No, and honestly, it's, while everybody talks to the couple, the fact is when the child is born, it's only your responsibility. And if you are ready financially, mentally.
Even my own mother did. She said, if you have kids, we'll come. I was like, come, do a trial run. I want to see if you live in my house for 6 months. If you show me live in my house for 6 months, take care of my dog, I'll produce a child.
Yeah, the support system is though very important.
I mean, if you have the support systems, if you have the economic means, if you want to, go ahead. But nobody else should ever have to pressurize you into doing anything you don't want to do.
Agreed. Agreed. This has been a very, very interesting conversation, Devika. I think from the huge, celebrated, glamorous world of wedding, my purpose was to understand who is Devika and how does she deal with how she's built what she has built today, without any experience or any background in in wedding planning, and probably bringing a structure to the industry, I would say, and what it takes at an individual level to be able to build that and then sustain and then carry on with your other pursuits. Thank you for watching this. If you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure you hit the like button, comment what was your favorite part, and also subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to press the bell notification to never miss a new episode, because we have a lot more coming. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Google, JioSaavn by the name Questions I Wanted to Ask. You can listen to it wherever you like. Link will be in the description. You can follow me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And all the links are in the description. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.